Okay, hi everyone. Well, welcome to our See All show online exhibition. We are very happy to have this exhibition, have this possibility to spend a little bit differently time than just working. And my name is Sanita. I'm sales director in Caravella, and today we wanted to talk about very important topic, which is sustainability and responsible sourcing. We are very, very proud to announce that today we have asked the special speakers to join our webinar. Today we will have from Denholm Seafood the speakers is Robert Duty and Nicola Hope. From Scottish Pelagic Fishermen Association, we will have Ian Gatt and Dr. Steve Mackinson. And from Napa project, we will have Dr. Tom Pickerell. Right now, I guess we will be starting slowly, putting up our guests, but one thing I would like to ask you to if you have any questions after all presentations, we will have a questions and answers session. So if you have any questions, you are welcome to write them in the QA line during the presentation. It will help us a little bit to save time because there is a slight delay in a live stream and broadcast. So yeah, welcome our first speakers from Denholm Seafoods. Are you ready? And Denholm, Robert, Nicole, could you please turn your microphone on?
Hi.
Yeah, all good.
Good. Share screen. Can you see that presentation, Sunita?
Yes, we can see it. Go ahead.
Perfect. Myself and Robert are going to speak today about the pelagic industry in Scotland and the science behind the scenes. Thank you for logging into our webinar. Today we will be discussing some information about how our operation works here in Peterhead and how we ensure the highest quality of raw materials to supply customers such as Caravella. Once me and Robert have discussed a bit about our business, we will then pass you on to Ian and Steve, who will talk about the science behind sustainable fishing. Here at our plant in Peterhead, we process pelagic fish caught by our vessel partners in the rich waters of the North East Atlantic. We produce a wide range of high-quality pelagic fish products, which are then delivered fresh or frozen to our customers in Europe and worldwide. This can also be done by our own logistics department. Denholm Seafoods is based in Peterhead, Europe's largest fishing port, allowing our vessels to land their catch directly at our front door. Denholm Seafoods have had a long-standing, excellent, close working relationship with Caravella, going back many years. We have supplied them with frozen mackerel and herring products all year round. Our main species we deal with here at Denholm Seafoods are herring and mackerel. All of our fish is caught by Denholm Seafood's fishing vessel partners. Our fishermen are the largest holders of pelagic fish quota in the UK. The fishing seasons where mackerel is caught in the winter, which is January to February, in autumn, which is October, November, and then our herring season is in July. Please see the below map. This is the vessels reported catching in these areas. The darker green shows the higher intensity of catching. This is on the Scottish coast. In this slide, I'm going to discuss a bit about our products that we offer here at Denholm Seafoods. We mainly offer herring and mackerel. Herring fat content is usually 12 to 18%, and we can offer whole round butterfly fillet, deli cut, in all different sizes. Herring is MSC certified. Our mackerel fat content in the autumn season is 20 to 24%, and in the winter season, 18 to 22%. In certain seasons, the mackerel that are landed can be caught in as little as 6 hours from port. This guarantees the freshest and best quality of raw material. Both our herring and mackerel are caught in the northeast Atlantic, catching area being FAO 27 in the northeast Atlantic. When caught, the fish are held in refrigerated seawater tanks to ensure first-class condition. Well, now we'll speak a bit about our operation and our partnership with the vessels. We work in a system of vertical integration. Our fishing partners are shareholders and fellow directors of Denholm Seafoods, ensuring a close relationship. The fishermen and our processing plant managers are in constant communication to regulate the landings. We have total involvement from the catching of the fish to the final production. This ensures a guaranteed supply of top quality material. Next up, we have a bit about our logistics and distribution. We have full traceability throughout the distribution process due to our digitalised stock control system and having our own cold store here in Peterhead. We own and operate a range of vehicles best suited to the fish products being transported. We have the facilities to load these trucks as well as containers and reefer vessels directly at our factory. Our fish products are exported globally, being especially popular in Europe and Asia Pacific. We have a strong relationship with several established European hubs. This supports fast delivery of the highest quality. In the image here, we have a map showing all of our European ports and connections. I'll now pass you on to Robert to discuss a bit about the reality of life after Brexit for our business.
Well, relating to Brexit, the last time that we were involved in this presentation with Carabella, it's a case of deal or no deal. And obviously we all know the net result. So I'll just talk about the challenges that we've faced, this is Denholm Seafoods in particular, as a result of the Brexit. Now, obviously there is a major increase in documentation with customs declarations, health certificates for UK exports to the EU, which have added a significant cost to us, which obviously we never had in the past. Now we are a third country, we have got to provide the same documentation as we would to dealing with, the Eastern European countries, etc. This was always going to be the case. This would have been the case even if there had been no deal. And it was obvious to us, and that neither the UK or the EU were prepared for this, for Brexit. Obviously the deal was done late, but we are disappointed in a way because this situation regarding documentation systems was known the minute it was clear that Brexit was happening. So in the early days, at the start of the year, there was a tremendous confusion in many cases for the exporters, and particularly it was more difficult, I've got to say, for companies who were involved in what we call groupage transport, whereby a lot of the companies are loading the same transport, and so you may have 50, 60 different species, many suppliers on the same transport going through hubs. And getting documentation right from day one was very difficult because many of these people, unfortunately, didn't have experience on lots of issues, particularly on the hubs and on our side too, because documentation was new and there was a lot of confusion. It has improved, but it is still difficult for that sector more than I guess the pelagic industry. And we also faced inconsistency in some of the EU ports, whereby you would arrive in, say, Holland with a set of documents which were acceptable, then discover in Germany there might be one or two documents which were slightly different. And that caused a lot of problems because there was a lot of hold-ups with transport going through border controls. In our case, I can say it was quite difficult in Holland, quite reasonable in France, as opposed to the British transport, where France was more difficult. But it was problematic in the first month especially, and a lack of resources was a major factor, we think, on all sides, because there simply wasn't enough time to get things set up properly. There was a shortage of customs officials, administration on health certification, everywhere, both in the EU and the UK. You may say it's highly surprising, but it was not easy. And all the above resulted in long delays, in some cases, to clear the goods, late deliveries, and obviously additional costs to the transport companies. And the impact on Denholm Seafoods, I guess we can say ourselves and our colleagues in the primary pelagic processing sector in Peterhead and Shetland, we have had many, many years of exporting worldwide, and going way, way back to the old days of the former Soviet Union and beyond. And so we have a lot of experience in documentation and logistics, letters of credit. So we have the culture already, and because we do a lot of business previously, when we were members of the EU with Eastern European markets, we were used to the system, and the system is no different basically. So we were well prepared for it, and we employed extra personnel in readiness for this. We had our own internal customs clearance in our group, which made a big difference. So although we had obviously situations in the first weeks where there was a lot of confusion with the border controls, we did get through it. And I've got to acknowledge that the pelagic industry is different to, say, the commercial sector and the guys involved in shellfish, live shellfish, whereby we have, herring mackerel mainly. So you've got two commodity codes as opposed to, umpteen commodity codes for fresh and frozen and live. So although it was difficult for us, I've got to say, not quite so bad as our colleagues in the other sectors. And but the situation has improved. It couldn't get any worse to start with. It has improved, and I'm sure going forward, all the other members of the industry will get used to the system. One thing that will never change is the cost of it. There's nothing we can do about that. But I can say from our side, we did not lose any business. We supplied all our customers in the EU, outside the EU, mostly in time. And I'm quite 100% confident that going forward that the Brexit situation on that side will not cause the pelagic industry too much problems going forward. It can only get better. Moving on to, we talk about the standards these days, MSC, etc. And there's also the responsible fishing standard, which is now operated through global seafood associations, which is an independent body, non-profit making organisation. I'm pleased to say that our partner vessels, the Tates, the fishing vessel Tates, from the Klondike Fishing Company, who are directors and partners and supply a major share of our raw material, they have become one of the first boats to be certified by this scheme, which has been well received by the retail in the UK. There's been a press release this week, and it's been given good press from quite a number of the major UK retailers. And this provides another scheme whereby it concentrates on the practices from the catch to the shore, the welfare of the crews, and obviously the sustainability angle. So we're very pleased that our members have already got themselves in the scheme, and we're hopeful in the next weeks that the rest of the two other Klondike vessel and our other partner vessel will also be participating in the responsible fishing scheme. And it's we have a very good working relationship with the vessels. Our fishing vessels are very much involved with us, not just in catching fish, but also in the marketing, and very much involved in the sustainability angle as well. So it's a very good system.
Thank you very much for listening, and please can you keep any important questions for the end of our presentation. I will now pass you on to Ian, who's going to discuss a bit about the science.
Good afternoon, my name is Ian Gatt. I'm Chief Executive of the Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association. I'm also Chairman of the Scottish Pelagic Sustainability Group, which I'll speak about in a little while. Together with my colleague, Dr. Steve Mackinson, who is the Chief Scientific Officer of the Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association, we will provide an overview of the pelagic catching sector in Scotland, and Steve will give an insight to the status of the pelagic stocks, and also provide you with a briefing in some of the science projects we are involved in. The association itself was formed in 1932, some 89 years ago. At that time, the membership was around 3,000. It's made up of fishermen and shore-based industries, such as fish buyers and net manufacturers. And at the top right of the slide, you can see a picture of a typical association vessel from that time, a sail drifter, herring drifter. And contrast that with today, when the association has now 22 members. All of these are vessel owners, so you could say there's been a huge amount of rationalisation going on over the decades. The vessels are based in Scotland and Northern Ireland. We have 7 in Shetland, there's 10 in Fraserburgh, 3 in Peterhead, and 2 in Northern Ireland. And the vessels in our fleet, such as the Charisma, which is in the picture there, are comparable with other pelagic fishing boats operating in the Northeast Atlantic. The vessel's length, it ranges from 45 to 85 metres. A typical boat would be around 70 metres. In recent years, we've seen a period of fleet renewal. This is ongoing, with at least 2 new boats joining the fleet in 2020 and 2023. There's been a particular focus on catch quality and crew safety. Vessel owners are investing in the most up-to-date refrigeration, fish handling and pumping equipment to produce the best quality fish to the processing factories, who are in turn continuously investing in upgrading their processing equipment. Vessel owners have also driven efficiency as part of the rebuild programme, with a reduction of CO2 emissions a major factor in this. So there's a huge amount of reinvestment going into the pelagic sector to keep us at the forefront of technology in order to deliver the best possible product to the market in the most environmentally friendly way. Francis Sanderson, who is a student at the North Atlantic Fisheries College in Shetland and working in conjunction with the University of Aberdeen, has just completed a study on the environmental impacts of pelagic fish caught by Scottish vessels, part of our PhD studies. And it was partly funded by the Scottish Pelagic Sustainability Group. And the study itself revealed that these fisheries have a much lower carbon footprint than land-based meat production such as chicken, beef and pork. What's also welcomed is that Scottish caught pelagic fish has a lower environmental impact than other seafood products. For instance, farmed salmon is 7.2 times higher, Norwegian caught cod is 3.5 times higher, Norwegian caught haddock is 3.9 times higher. And what the study concludes is that Scottish caught pelagic fish represents a climate-smart food source that helps deliver targets for net zero carbon. So turning to the pelagic quotas in the UK for 2021, we'll have 228,000 tonnes of mackerel to catch. That's a 4% increase from 2020. And North Sea herring, an increase of 4%, so come out at just short of 62,000 tonnes. And in Atlantic Scotch herring, almost 13,000 tonnes, which is an increase in 70%. But that's been driven by the stock biomass increase and an improved quota share for the UK as part of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the European Union. So turning now to the Scottish Pelagic Sustainability Group, was formed in 2007. And if you have an opportunity, please check out our website, which you can see the link to it at the bottom of the screen on the right. There's a lot of useful information in there. It tells you the fleet, the fisheries we're operating, and the things we're doing in terms of science and sustainability. The group itself was created at a time when the industry saw an opportunity to promote the sector as being well managed and sustainable, just at the time when the focus on sustainability had just taken off. Membership comprises of the Scottish supply chain, which includes both the catching and the processing sector, the Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association and the Pelagic Producers Organisations, POs, represent the catching sector, and members of the Scottish Pelagic Processors Association represent the factories. The main focus for SPSG initially has been to enter the main pelagic fisheries for MSC certification. At one time we had 5 fisheries in the programme, but that has changed over time, and I'll speak about the challenges we face in keeping pelagic fisheries in the programme in more detail in the coming slides. SPSG has also funded some projects, including science-based ones, such as the carbon footprint study I mentioned in the previous slide. The group also funds the servicing of mackerel tag scanners in the processing factories, and the information gathered from the factories is used directly in the mackerel scientific assessment. And Steve's going to talk a little about that in his presentation. Another standard work that we carry out is to promote the health benefits of eating pelagic fish to consumers through regular press articles and through social media channels. So as I said, the SPSG's main focus has been to certify all our main Scottish pelagic fisheries. But maintaining these in certification has not been easy, despite our best efforts working with other European and Norwegian fisheries clients to keep these fisheries in the MSC programme. The good news is our North Sea herring fishery is in very good shape and will begin the 4th reassessment process during this summer. In all our MSC fisheries, we are collaborating with other fisheries clients, and this one is with the Dutch and the Danes, and my Dutch colleague acts as the coordinator for this assessment. As you know, the mackerel fishery is suspended. I'm the MINSA mackerel coordinator, which is the client group comprising of all the EU and Norwegian fisheries. The fishery certification itself expires in November 2021, unless the conditions placed in the fishery are resolved. That's unlikely at this stage, but I'll explain a little more on that in the next couple of slides. Our Atlantic Scotch herring fishery was suspended in December. We operate a client group for this fishery too, with the Danish and Swedish colleagues acting as the client coordinators. The certificate was due to expire in July this year, but it was clear that the fisheries conditions could not be closed out. So instead of drafting a meaningless corrective action plan, which would only been applicable for a few months, we decided to let the fishery drop out of the programme. There are 2 main issues we have struggled with in our MSC fisheries, which is fluctuating scientific advice, including in-year TAP changes to the advice. In addition, there have been frequent ICES benchmarks, usually undertaken to resolve issues found in the assessment. These in general lead to changes in what's called reference points, which change perception of stock status and also resets how much fish can be taken from the stock. Because of changes to the MSC standard, the fishery auditors or the certifying bodies who are looking at the fishery feel that they are under pressure to undertake what's called expedited audits when there's been a perceived change in stock status. And this is what happened with mackerel back in October 2018, when ICES issued an advice that showed mackerel stock to be declining rapidly. At that time, ICES also stated they had recognised there was a problem with the assessment and were going to conduct a benchmark exercise to try and resolve the matter in April 2019. But the Mincer mackerel auditor stated they had to undertake the expedited audit, and despite pleas from myself as the Mincer coordinator, along with my colleagues, to delay that process until the ICES work had been completed, our certifying body felt under pressure to undertake the audit regardless. So the report came back to recommend suspension was released exactly the same time as ICES released their benchmark report showing the mackerel stock to be in good health and resolve issues at the benchmark. And our summer 29 fisheries audit, which we have to do on an annual basis despite being in suspension, the Mincer Group presented evidence to our auditors to show that the mackerel quota overshoot was much less than before, less than 10%. In fact, it was 7.8% in that particular year. Our auditors accepted the argumentation and took the view that the suspension should be lifted. However, the auditor can't ratify that decision without undergoing a harmonisation exercise with other MSC mackerel fisheries. And one of the other auditors didn't agree with the Mincer auditor, and despite us having the largest fishery, our auditor was overruled and the lowest score prevails. So for us as the clients, it's hugely frustrating and makes it very difficult for us to maintain these fisheries in the programme. In essence, the MSC suspensions are down to the scientific advice being overfished. But when you're not in control of what other fishing nations are doing, it's impossible to address what's been asked for in the fisheries conditions. There's a slide has gone amiss, but I'll just talk through it. And it's basically, is there some hope of resolving these issues? And I think the short answer to that is unlikely in the next couple of years, certainly until we get to the end of the COVID crisis. However, there has been some progress and hope for the future on the coastal state front. All the parties signed a coastal state agreement at the end of last year, and that hasn't been achieved since 2009. On the positive side, there's agreement on the TAC level, which is in line with the ICES advice, but the downside is an agreement on quota shares still needs to be found. But you can't sense a real, genuine desire by the coastal states now to find a solution to the quota sharing. And this is borne out by the fact that there's already been a couple of mackerel coastal states meetings this year. A third is scheduled to be held shortly, and the parties may well meet again in advance of the annual October meeting. Of course, the other issue at play is the MSC standard review and the potential implications for the pelagic sector. Currently, as I outlined, client fisheries are judged by the outcomes for the entire fishery. Although we are only in control of our own fishery, our fate is dictated by the poorest performing client, as per the harmonisation process. There are discussions about making changes to the standard, and that would make it viable for individual clients to go back into assessment as their own unit of assessment and be judged on the performance of your own fishery. But honestly, I don't know where that discussion will end up. But regardless, the SPSG is committed to entering these fisheries for reassessment when the conditions are met. As you know, the UK is no longer an EU member state, but the Scottish pelagic sector is working closely with UK and Scottish governments to ensure we have sustainable fisheries management in place. A large part of the Scottish pelagic industry focus will be to work with the UK government to try and reinstate comprehensive international management at coastal states level for our peak pelagic stocks. What we want is sustainable, well-managed and profitable fisheries, not just for the people working in the industry now, and we have a good industry, but it's equally important we hand over a good, healthy industry for future generations. I just mentioned the fluctuating scientific advice, and over the years there have been different perceptions of the state of the pelagic stocks between scientists and fishermen. Our vessel owners were keen to contribute real-time information from the fishing grounds to help improve the information knowledge base on our key stocks. In 2016, the association recruited Dr. Steve Matkinson as our Chief Scientific Officer. And over the last 5 years, through Steve's work, we have been engaged in a number of science projects, both at a UK and EU level. Our main objective is to be a respected and trusted provider of additional data from the Scottish pelagic fleet that has a practical purpose of being high quality so it can be used in scientific assessments. And I'm glad to say we've made a huge progress on this front over the last 5 years. Our mission goal is quite simple, but it's hugely important. We want to bring industry to the scientific community and in return bring the scientific community closer to the industry. I'll now hand over to Steve, who will give you an insight into the work he is carrying out.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I'll share my screen now. Okay, is everybody see that? Good. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thanks for the introduction, Ian. My name is Stephen Mackinson. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer to the Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association that has its home here in Fraserburgh, which is one of the main ports for the Scottish pelagic fleet. You'll see the other one at the end of my slides. So I'm going to give you a talk now that introduces some of the work that we've been doing since I've been appointed. That's, like Ian says, it brings industry close to science and science closer to industry. I'm going to focus on herring and mackerel, but we also have activities related to blue whiting as well. So first I'm going to introduce a little bit about the state of the stocks, and you've heard from Ian already that the changes in the perception of stocks causes an issue for MSC certification. It also causes an issue for scientists. It's not an easy job to get the stock assessments done right and ensure that the quality is there. And each year, it's a part of a progressive evolution, if you like, trying to bring more information and more knowledge to the table each time. So fish stock assessment are routinely things that get evolved and have to be checked as they move on, as new knowledge comes to the fore. So I'll give you a quick overview of that, then talk about some of our science initiatives and demonstrate how the science actually connects very well with the requirement of the market for traceability, and we can bring those two worlds together. So the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea is an intergovernmental body that spans across the North Atlantic, and that's the forum that conducts, if you like, the integrated assessments and the science and puts the science advice out for total advised catches. So it's that body through which all of the science and all of the countries cooperate. And if we take a look at mackerel, for example, this is the green lights, like the traffic lights, are a snapshot of the stock assessments. And that we see in the last 3 years, we have fishing pressure is below the fishing pressure reference point called FMSY, and the stock size is above the MSY maximum sustainable yield trigger point. So basically the stocks are high and fishing pressure is low, and that's been consistent over the last 3 years. So Ian referred to the perception of stocks. So this is the perception of the stocks and from the stock assessment now, but we have seen, if you like, glitches in that perception of the stock. But the one thing that is consistent is that the mackerel stock has shown incredible recruitment over the last few years. In fact, the last 3 years running have been the highest recruitment ever seen in the time series. And we know already at this point that that paints a picture for further increases in the mackerel stock in the coming years. So if we take a look at herring, similar picture for herring. For the last 3 years running, the fishing pressure has been below the safe level, if you like, of fishing mortality, and the stock size has been above, with the exception of 2020. And I'll explain that briefly. 2020, according to the latest assessment, is the first year in 30 years in the perception of the stock that the biomass has fallen below this trigger value, the maximum sustainable yield trigger value. But the reasons for that is really not any cause for concern. We've seen this picture coming over the last few years. It's the dying out of some older, larger fish. So these fish, the fishery has been relying on fish that are sort of 7 and 8 year olds and the bigger, heavier fish for the last few years. And they're coming to the end of their natural life. So the biomass has been slowly going down as they work their way through the fishery. But what we've seen then in the last 2 years is an increasing recruitment of younger fish. So what we're going to get over the next few years is a dominance of smaller, younger fish as part of the fishery. And of course, they weigh less. So the biomass of the fish in the whole stock has gone down, but the numbers of fish is actually very high. So we can expect to see smaller average sized fish from the North Sea fishery in the next few years. But it's really not any cause for concern. So coming now to the science, the key part of this really is for me about bringing the industry to science. Part of my role is to be able to communicate science to industry, but the main part of that role is to bring the industry to science. So we've been involved in developing a self-sampling scheme, which I'll talk about in a little bit of detail. But our vision is for Scottish pelagic fishermen to be respected providers of scientifically credible data that's used to assess fish stocks, monitor changes in the pelagic ecosystem, and support management decisions. And what that means is that's information that's available to make decisions on, to provide advice, to go into research about changes in the marine environment, and that the industry itself is seen as a credible supplier of quality data, so it can be relied, if you like, as research platforms and research contributors. And there are a number of sort of institutional challenges still to this, but we've made great strides in the last few years. And this kind of mission is not new, as it were. It's not novel to us. We're seeing similar changes across the industries, in fact, across the world, where the engagement with the fishing industry is becoming much more professional, if you like, at a scientific level. And so effectively what we have here, all of our work is driven by a plan. Everybody has a plan. And if you split that down the middle, effectively we have two sides. We have a data collection strategy, and that's about working with the vessels as collection platforms, but also with the factories and making sure that they have the right technologies and equipment and are trained in the right ways to collect data in the right formats. And the second part of it is the engagement strategy. And that's very much about making sure that we're in the right places, the right time, to make sure that the information that we collect can be used, is useful and usable in the systems that need it. So both things go hand in hand. Since June of last year, all of the vessels are now involved in the self-sampling scheme. We have a couple of Irish vessels at the bottom, the Havilah and Stephanie M, who are not participating at present, but they're already heavily involved in scientific work in their region of fisheries anyway. And there's one vessel that isn't a member of the Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association, but we're in conversation about them participating in the scheme as well. So we have, since 2020, we have full coverage, and it's a full job now to keep up to speed with the data flows coming in from all of the vessels. And what I wanted to do here is just provide you a snapshot of kind of the richness of the data. So typically when fisheries data, scientific information is collected, it's collected at a very granulated level, what we call ICES rectangles, and they're sort of boxes that are 1 degree by half a degree. And you don't see the level of detail, but we're collecting information at the whole level of every vessel. So we have hole by hole precise information. And what that allows us to do is not only provide information that's directly useful to the fishing vessels themselves and on the traceability front, but it allows us actually to conceive the future of stock assessments. How can you use this kind of information at a much finer resolution that isn't normally possible to achieve? So over the last few years, since we started off with a handful of vessels in June 2018, we've now sampled nearly 400 trips and amounting to measured, and this is measured by the crew. Nearly 100,000 fish have been measured. We have that biological data, and we've also been investing in the technology to be able to do that efficiently at sea. And there are all sorts of fancy equipment you can buy and use, but most of it isn't really robust at sea. So we've developed specific instruments to work with the vessels to allow the crew to do it effectively without paper and pens and things like that, and to input the data, check its quality, and to be able to send that information directly to us back on shore. So we've invested in the technology as well. So what I'd like to do is just give you a few examples of how this information can be used in the context of stock assessment, which is really an understanding about, what the stock assessments are used to forecast the available catches in the future. So that's where it really hits home for many people. How can this data be used? Well, the first one is we can improve the tracking of the age structure of fish. So we know how many fish are passing through the populations over time by looking at their length and the weight profiles of the catch. The fishing industry provides a first-hand opportunity, or their first eyes on the water, to see how the recruitment of the young fish are coming through in future years. And at the moment, stock assessments always lag kind of 1 year behind on that front. So we're looking to ways to incorporate that, what we call sort of in-season data, into the assessments. We can monitor changes in the biology, the growth and maturation, and how fish condition is changing in the ecosystem. And I'll come back to that in a moment. I've already mentioned being able to provide fine-scale resolution data that can be the future of fisheries modelling. So collecting data now that paves the way for the future capabilities of modelling, improving and evolving those systems. And finally, the information on the vessels themselves about the performance and efficiency of the fishing vessels in their operations, and relating that to changes in catches, so we can measure fishery performance at the same time. So there are a few of the examples where the information collected is directly relevant to stock assessment and fisheries management. But now I'd just like to get into a little bit of detail to show you the quality of the information, just to give you a flavour, the kind of results that we're getting, if you like, from the Scottish sampling work. So what you see here is a plot, a graph, and on the bottom you have the length of mackerel, and on the vertical axis you have the weight of mackerel. And we call this the length-weight relationship. And the blue dotted line is a prediction of the length and weight relationship, and that prediction is used by the government authority to submit data to the stock assessment on how heavy the fish are. So that prediction is used to submit data to the stock assessment. They don't actually measure the weight of fish; they just measure the lengths and predict the weight. But we've measured the weight of fish, so we have the length and weight measurements, and you can see the point here is the grey line is different to the blue line, and effectively what we're seeing is that mackerel are growing faster, but they're not reaching the same kind of weights for a given length. So the little ones are heavier and the big ones are not so heavy. So the point of that is that it's different to the information that's currently being submitted to the stock assessments. So clearly that has an impact, and I'll demonstrate that with my next slide. Basically, this is the same picture, but for herring, and you can see across every month, the grey line is not matched with the blue line. So basically, the growth of herring that is actually observed and we're measuring is different than that's predicted and used in a stock assessment. And the bottom line of this is that the herring that are there being caught are heavier at all sizes than predicted, meaning they're growing faster than previously thought. And what that means effectively, the bottom line is there's more biomass than would be predicted in the current assessment. Of course, this could go either way, but the point is by actually measuring, using the fishing industry to measure the lengths and weight, we're yielding really valuable, important information for a stock assessment. But our work isn't undertaken alone. There's only one of me. So collaboration is essential, and it's now it's really very wide across fisheries organisations, academic organisations, and government institutes involved in fisheries science as well. So you see icons there related to both factories and all sorts of institutions. So we have a wide and growing network of research collaborations, and I'll just touch on one or two of those to give you a flavour of that. So for a number of years now, we've been involved in some detailed genetic work on the identity of West Coast herring stocks. And that's related to understanding how the stocks in the north are different from the stocks in the south. And industry vessels have been used every year to go out and sample the stocks and take detailed information that's going back to reveal those genetic differences. And next year that will be formed part of the basis for a special assessment that will look at how those stocks should be assessed in the area. The second one is we're working very closely then with the factories, the Scottish factories, to recover information on that they routinely collect as part of quality assurance on fat content. But we've seen this as a novel data set now to be able to use to research and understand how changes in the condition of fish related to changes in the marine environment. And we've invested in a PhD student at Aberdeen University who's now she's in the middle of her PhD and recently and soon to publish some work on this on herring fat content. But part of that process is we're working to give back that data. It's been a huge process of recovering data from paper records and all sorts of things. But we're going to mobilize that data and give it back to the factories in a way that they can see the long-term value of monitoring all sorts of quality indicators of the fish. So we're working on that process at the moment. So there's a clear link there between the science and the utility for the factories. And the final one that I wanted to share with you is work on tagging mackerel. So every year mackerel are tagged, thousands of mackerel are tagged and released back into the ocean and then captured again as part of the fishing process. And that information goes directly into the stock assessment, both to predict the abundance of different age groups of mackerel, but also to understand their migration. And the factories are directly involved in this. So as the fish come through the conveyor belt, there's an automatic scanner that detects whether a tag exists or not, and immediately sends that information to a central database. And I can show you here, for instance, just an example of this. You can go directly online and find this information. Last year, so in 2019, there were nearly 56,000 tags that were released. These are the blue ones off the west coast of Ireland. And in 2020, we had nearly 2,000 tags were recovered from catches by the factories. And it shows you where those fish were caught. So you can see where they were released and where they were caught. And this is just, a large scale picture of it. But there's research digging into the detail for all of the age groups and how long fish are at sea and where they go. So it's an incredibly valuable data set. And that wouldn't be possible without the support and close working with the factories. Okay, finally, I wanted now just to make it really make clear that connection between the value of the science and the market, if you like, the end that I guess many of you are really closely interested in. So what we're aiming for with self-sampling and the research at Scottish Pelagic is to have a transparent, quality assured self-sampling and research program. So people can be confident that what we're doing is good and it's accessible and visible. So it bears scrutiny. And the information that it generates is used by scientists for stock assessment and research. It's valuable and used by the vessel owners as business intelligence tools for their fishing operations to see how the patterns have changed in their operations, fish sizes, areas fished. So they have records that are working for them directly, so they're using their own data in a way that works for them. But it's also used by the processors and retailers to be able to tell that story, if you like, from catch to batch, I call it. It's where you're monitoring both the biological parameters and also quality parameters of the fish right through the system, right from where it was caught all the way through. So, traceability is the key. And what that demonstrates is overall together, these things demonstrate the responsibility of the Scottish pelagic industry to in their whole business from the start to beginning. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Robert, Nicole, Jan, and Steve. And now our next speaker will be Dr. Tom Pickerell. Are you ready? Yeah, I'm just waiting when sharing your screen.
Yep, sorry about that. Can you?
It's okay.
Right, I'll just share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that okay?
I guess yes. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today about the North Atlantic Pelagic Advocacy Group, more conveniently called NAPA. So a lot has been discussed today already, some great presentations which give an understanding of the situation with several pelagic species in the Northeast Atlantic. So what I want to tell you about is the origins of NAPA, and they relate to what you've heard already. Back in 2019, members of the UK retail sector and their immediate suppliers were concerned by the suspension of the MSC certificate for Northeast Atlantic mackerel. And you can see from this picture here, one of the consequences. There was a relabeling of products, for example. But for many of these UK retailers, they had made quite public seafood sustainability commitments, and the loss of the certificate was having serious impacts on that. Mackerel is a big seller in the UK. At that meeting, they discussed the causes of this certificate suspension, and it became apparent that the same was being threatened for the Atlanto-Scandian herring and the Northeast Atlantic blue whiting. And it was at that point the group realized that they couldn't just focus on mackerel, and they needed to look at the others as well, Atlanto-Scandian herring and blue whiting. So the group decided that they would focus on these three groups with an aim of addressing the situation and securing the MSC certificate back for the Northeast Atlantic mackerel and maintaining it for the other two. This is the current state of membership in NAPA. I've got a couple of groups there are currently with our steering committee for approval. It's just a sort of a formality step there, but I wanted to put it up to show you the range of members that we have across the supply chain, not only in retail and suppliers and processors, but also in the aquaculture feed production sector, the aquaculture product producers themselves. And you can see it's no longer a UK initiative. We're very much an international group. We also have some trade members there. You can see things like the British Retail Consortium, the Swedish Seafood Association, Eurocommerce. They're not individual members, of course, but they work with us as sort of associated members. We also work with 3 NGOs. They're not members of NAPA. They don't have a say in what we do, but we work with them because they are interested in the situation. And also we can actually learn from them. So that's WWF Client Earth, which coordinates a platform called Sustainable Seafood Coalition, which many of the UK retailers are members of, but also Sustainable Fisheries Partnerships, which have a lot of interest in the feed fisheries. So, as mentioned a couple of times, our key interest here is the MSC certification loss in these fisheries. So obviously mackerel lost first, and then that was followed at the latter part of last year for Atlantic herring and the blue whiting. And of course these will have consequences, but particularly for the blue whiting, on the feed component, the marine ingredient, which then is a requirement for certification of things like salmon, which is obviously a huge seller across most of Europe. So this is what we're sort of set up to look at and address. When you actually look at what is needed to get the fisheries back to that level that would be able to be certified again, there's a lot of information out there, which is not surprising. It's an incredibly data-rich fishery, but also these fisheries have just been suspended from MSC, so there's audit reports that are right up to date. So it was quite straightforward for us to identify what the challenges are in these fisheries. And as you can see here, they're very much limited around the management of the fisheries. There's no biomass issues, stock size issues. There's no bycatch concerns. There's no habitat impact either. So it's purely a management issue that's holding these fisheries back. And you've heard today the reasons behind that. I haven't got into that in this presentation because I knew it would be covered, but regardless of the causes of that, this is what we've got to address. And you can see here for all 3, we have 2 MSC elements. We have having well-defined and effective harvest control rules. Harvest control rules are essentially sort of long-term management rules that sort of say if the stock is doing this, we will agree to this level of catch, and if it's going that way, we'll have a sort of reduced level of catch. And these are kind of baked into the management, and it stops you having these annual negotiations where politics come to the forefront, and it lets everyone have long-term decision making, long-term planning abilities. There's also the legal and customary framework element there. Now that's a sort of a component of the harvest control rules. So this is the same kind of issue. But for herring and blue whiting, they also have harvest strategies, requirements, and the decision-making process. And that latter point revolves around the lack of dispute resolution at the coastal states meetings. So essentially, it's the ability for countries to set their own quotas unilaterally. So these are the areas that we've got to improve. We don't have to rebuild stocks or anything at the moment. So it's quite focused what needs to happen. So how are we going to do that? So our aims are pretty straightforward. We want an agreement on total allowable catches that are in line with scientific advice. So that's not just independently, but across all the groups. We don't want the total catch to exceed the scientific advice, but we also want long-term science-based management agreements. So long-term harvest strategies in place. We don't have an aim for certification because that's up to the client groups, and we didn't want to get distracted away from the sort of the bigger picture here, which is the actual management. So if we are successful, this will result in the fisheries being able to regain certification if they want it. Now, of course, that comes into the requirements of the market themselves, but we try to stay away from sort of collective positions on buying at all opportunities. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? We are going to seek to improve the policies. We're going to seek to improve the management of these fisheries. And how are we going to do that? Number one, advocacy. We're going to be loud advocates for the issues in the management at the minute, and calling out for improvements and setting out what these improvements should and could be. We're also going to try to support the coastal states in agreeing some form or mechanism or process of dispute resolution so that they don't feel the need or the urge or the ability to just walk away from the discussions. We want there to be a mechanism in place that enables them to reach agreement. And finally, we're also going to implement the ability for individual companies to specify what the commercial impact will be if there's no changes. And this ties into the advocacy. So it's not just us saying things need to change, but individual companies within NAPA are going to be saying, and if they don't, these are going to be the consequences, because these companies have made public commitments to sourcing sustainably, and they're not going to be able to meet that commitment for these fisheries unless the management improves. We're going to do this within a framework of improvement projects. So there's fishery improvement projects for mackerel and herring, and for the blue whiting, we're going to use the Marine Trust improvement projects. That's what was called the EFO-RS improvement project. So that's a scheme designed for feed. And the reason we're doing this for blue whiting is because you gain recognition not just for the fish, but also for the marine ingredient, which is very important for our feed company members. So why are we doing it through this approach? We don't need to do it through an improvement project. We could just do it. But the reason we're doing it within this framework is for these reasons here. Number one, clarity. We want to be very, very clear about what the challenges are and who's responsible for them. And as I've mentioned several times, it's the decision makers, the fisheries ministers, or their representatives of the coastal states. So very clear about who is responsible for making the decisions. Leverage. And this comes back to the commercial action. Now, a FIP or an improvement project, they're designed to utilise market power to incentivise change. And of course, this is what we're trying to do. So it makes perfect sense for us to use a FIP framework here. And very importantly, sourcing. I've mentioned that several companies, well, almost all of the companies within NAPA have made public commitments to seafood sourcing that at the minute, the loss of certificates would mean that they're unable to source these products. But of course, they still want to. And by sourcing them, we maintain some leverage and some influence. By putting them in a fishery improvement project, it gives them a legitimate reason for them to continue sourcing. Many companies also include what they call a pathway to sustainability, and a FIP is this. So certified or in a FIP. So this addresses that point. And the fourth point is transparency. We do not want anyone to accuse us of greenwashing or just sort of doing nothing for 3 years. A FIP has built-in transparency. We're going to be the FIP is going to be on the Fishery Progress website. The Marine Trust Improvement Project website will host our blue whiting work. There will be 6 monthly reviews that will be carried out externally. There'll be third party, so there's no funny business there. And so we're very keen to be transparent on this. Mackerel and herring fishery improvement project has last week been published on fisheryprogress.org, which is a platform designed for fishery improvement projects. You can have a look at it there. Our work plan, the assessments are all online there. Everything's accessible. We haven't yet done any public launch of this. We will be doing that with our new comms team, which we had our kickoff meeting with them yesterday. So this will be the very first piece of our advocacy that we do. The blue whiting is slightly different timeline for this, but we have completed the assessment, we have completed the fisheries action plan, and we have got the memorandum of understanding, and we have completed the application form for this. It just needs some final bits from individual NAPA members, so that's with the members at the moment. But then that will be submitted into the Marine Trust process. So in last year, 2020, it was the first year we had the ability to get involved in some advocacy of both the coastal states and the North East Atlantic Fisheries Commission. North East Atlantic Fisheries Commission is the management body here, the Regional Fisheries Management Organisation. They are responsible for the management of the stocks in both the blue and the orange areas. The blue areas are the national waters, of course, orange areas are international ones, but because they're straddling stocks, this is where you have the role of North East Atlantic Fisheries Commission. But this isn't the target for us. The target for us is instead the coastal states meeting. So outside of NEAFC, these coastal states get together and adopt management measures and allocations for the stocks. So these are the people that we need to be advocating with, speaking to, and making our asks to. They meet in October with the NIAF following in November. So this is giving us the sort of the focal point, though of course our advocacy will continue year round. So what are we asking? We're asking them to follow the advice, follow the scientific advice. We want long-term multi-annual management plans in place, and we also want the allocation issue resolved. NAPA does not have a position on allocations. We don't know, we do not have a position on who gets what. We just want the fisheries to be managed appropriately. So these are our key asks, which form the basis of all our advocacy work. So what can you do? If you're interested in this, you can join NAPA. The more people we have in NAPA, the louder our voice, the greater our influence. But also you can get recognition from sourcing from the improvement projects that we're running and demonstrate your leadership in this, the sustainability of these fisheries. We're also asking NAPA partners to develop a clear position on sourcing. You know, what is going to happen if the situation doesn't change? And it's really important that they do that individually. And finally, engage in advocacy. We will be doing a lot of the advocacy. We will be preparing resources, but it's really important that individual companies as well speak about the economic consequences of the situation. So here's a link to further information. We're hosted on the Seafish webpage, but very happy to take any questions, or also if anyone's got any questions they'd rather ask offline, very happy to answer any emails or contact you any other way. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to all speakers. Now, if you have any questions or questions, then please write them down and we will try to answer them. Yeah, well, yeah, thanks a lot for joining us of this webinar. We also believe with Caravella that there should be a dialogue between the organizations, suppliers, and us as a producers. So we only working together we can manage to have a more sustainable and responsible fish stock. So yeah, and it's been a wonderful show for us during this CEO. We are making this already a second time. First time was in October when we had also as the speakers Robert and Nicole from Denholm Seafood, and we really hope that we will grow. And despite the situation outside, we will be able to share our opinion, to share the information about new products, about the activities we do, and be prepared for going back into a real life. So, do we have any questions? No. Okay, well, anyway, all these webinars, yesterday we had a webinar about new food trends and vegan market. Then on Tuesday we had a webinar about the salmon project. So all these webinars, including this one, will be available online, and also for anyone who wants to see it, you can just write us an email and we will send it to you. Well, I guess if there's no questions, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for our speakers, and hopefully see you soon again.